Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another version of Who's Got My Money here live in Las Vegas at Tech Alley. And today we got something special for y'all. We're doing a traction version for Valentine's Day, so you guys can work on attracting that key investor that you've been looking for, or the group of investors that you've been looking for, and making sure that you can ask them the important question of, will you be mine? Will you be mine? I also forgot that I have to, in order to rep for my nieces, I have to be prepared here. Yes, thank you so much. So this is how this is going to go down. As you guys know, here in Las Vegas, we really believe that Vegas can become the capital of capitals. That's going to be happening over the next couple of years. You watch it. I said it first. We also very much believe in the Vegas venture ecosystem here, and so we're always on the hunt for really talented founders that we believe are going to make it. You're going to be hearing from a few of those today very briefly, and then one of our favorites that is decided that he understands the importance of key stakeholders building an ecosystem. As I've talked about, there's 5 major key stakeholders that can endow a founder with resources and are usually the backers that support in building, the key infrastructure in order to build a venture ecosystem that really works. And so what's really cool about what Elias has done is Elias is not only a founder, but he's also a community builder, which basically means he gets double the opportunity, I think. We can kind of talk through that sometime. So another new thing we're going to start doing is I want to start doing a few highlights of some of the great founders and what they're up to and giving some updates. So very, very first, we're going to have Mr. James Ritchie come down here just for 1 second, and he's going to give us a real quick update on what JewelFit has going on and the move that he just made. Okay, James, real quick. 1 second. Just stand up real quick.
Hi, my name is James Ritchie. I'm with JewelFit. We're a technology company.
There you go.
Using data, robotics, and AI to disrupt everything we think we know about fitness. We recently moved into Blackfire, 8400 West Sunset. This is a go-to-market play as well as a showcase. So please reach out to me, come by and try a workout like none other.
Love it. Woo! Thank you so much. All right, next up. How many of you guys want to hear from a founder that's raised $8 million for the budget? Awesome. Come on down, Naira. You know who you are. One of the things I loved about the session we did, Who's Got My Money with Naira, she was super honest about how when you raise the money, you think it gets easier. It does not. Now you take on another set of problems. So real quick, can you just give us an update? You obviously can tell us about SideX in the background very quickly, in 30 seconds. And then you're going to tell us about the win you had. And then we're going to get you some more capital.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Naira, the co-founder, co-CEO of SideX. We are a consumer research platform that helps companies understand their ideal customers, their pricing, their messaging, so they can accelerate their growth. So we're entering about year 6 in our startup. And as Kurt said, we have raised up to now 8.8, and we have 1 million pending. The journey has been not easy, and so when people ask me, how did you manage to raise that much? And I said, this started with bootstrapping, putting in all of my savings and my co-founder's savings. We took debt on top of it. We took our 401ks, and only then, and after about 2 years, we actually took the first money. And the first money came from friends and family. And so we did 2 convertible notes. And then we got in family office to participate. And throughout this journey, we constantly build relationships and communities. So an interesting story, there was a VC firm that when we had the idea, we said to them, hey, we're gonna build this. And they said, that's great. You're too early for us. And we said, okay, all right. So we went on with our journey, but we kept in touch. And so year 3, we went back to them and we were just telling them, hey, we just like won our first client and we have like 10K in MRR. And they said like, that's great. You're too early for us. I'm like, okay, all right. And then year 3 came, year 4 came, and then year 5 came. And we just kept them in the loop. And in year 5, something just clicked and matched. And they said, you're actually in our sweet spot. And so they ended up, actually leading our VC round. And subsequently, they ended up also helping us with the bridge. And so I share this because I've gotten a lot of no's. And I am always in the mindset that most likely than not, they're going to tell me no. And that's okay. And so you just have to keep just updating people and engaging them. And most of them are just not going to re-engage, but some of them might. And when the stars align, you may end up having a VC firm that actually invests in you and then bridges you and then introduces you to others.
Love it. All right. So we talked about how there's founders. We all know who those are. We talked about how there's funders. We also know who those are. But how many of you guys know what a framer is? A framer is just as important in the success of your startup. These are the experts. These are the advisors. These are the service organizations that help. If the founder builds the foundation, the framers help to build the framing on top of that. They help the startup stand up. So I want to introduce you guys a good friend of mine, full stack developer, Mr. Rick. And he's going to tell you a little bit about some of the things we have cooking. And before we get into that, the reason Rick and I became friends is because I'm talking to Rick and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I told him about the funding platform that we're building out to automate the fundraising process. And then I realized that he's helping 6 different startups raise money. And I'm like, what's a full stack developer doing helping founders raise money? 6 of them at the same time. You're crazy.
I'm crazy. Yes, I am. But so yeah, Kurt, thanks for the intro. I think where my passion for this comes from, actually dating back, and it kind of came, you were maybe a couple minutes after I talked about George Moncrief earlier today. So if you were here, I apologize if you're going to hear the same thing briefly. But George Moncrief was a real community builder here in Las Vegas. I met him in 2011 at kind of almost a precursor event to Tech Alley called the Vegas Jelly. If you talk to Josh Levitt about Tech Alley, he will mention that Vegas Jelly was sort of one of his inspirations. And at that event, I had already, by that time, I was working at Zappos, but I had co-founded a couple of startups. And there was just this thirst for knowledge. And so I started running pitch practice sessions at Vegas Jelly back then. And we would get in a room this size, we would get like 70 people every like 4 to 6 weeks listening to startups pitch. And we were helping them get their message, get used to public speaking. Obviously, that's one of people's biggest fears. And so that's just kind of carried through now. And so, yeah, so I'm a developer, but also a founder, and also interested in community as well. So happy to help in any way that I can.
Can you tell us about the hackathon we're working on before we move on?
Yeah, for sure. So we're working on something. So one of the things with pitches is you can go out and look for all kinds of advice on pitch decks on the internet. And some of it will be, on brand, some of it will be great, some of it will be terrible. We've got some secret sauce because we're a startup, and of course every startup has their own secret sauce. We've got our secret sauce on how we think pitch decks can be done better. And so what we're going to do is we're working on a hackathon for the community where we're going to bring in a bunch of developers. We're going to be using some AI technology in conjunction with our special sauce to help review pitch decks and provide founders with advice and feedback on their pitch decks that we think is completely different and much, much better than anything that's out there today.
So if any of you guys want to help support that, either with developers with bringing us some lunch, with whatever, you guys have a great space that would be awesome for an all-day hackathon, since we're probably going to turn this into a thing where we're developing cool stuff that makes it easier in the fundraising process. We'll see what else we decide to do. Thank you so much, Rick. Really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks.
Really great at making sure that this hackathon happens. Really appreciate that, Creighton, some of the others that are also involved. Okay, guys, so how many of you guys had a good Valentine's Day? How many of you guys? All right, just a few hands, not so much. Okay, cool. How about we redeem that today and talk about how you can be attractive to investors? And that's really what today is about. And so instead of it being just about who's got my money, it's really about who's got my traction and putting you in the driver's seat to be attractive. And by creating that traction, some of it which you may already have and don't realize how to actually share it, or some of it you can actually create with a few steps. And so I don't think I need to introduce Sammy Lay. Everybody knows Sammy Lay. Say hi, Sammy.
Hi, Sammy.
She's badass. So we'll skip some of the introductions, but you guys know that we're always united in creating founder funders. These are founders that capitalize their companies and then get to go on and be angel investors and invest in other startups, and the cycle starts anew. So any thoughts before we get into this?
I do have a really fun Valentine's Day analogy. The business world and business relationships often mirror personal relationships in the real world. And so one of my favorite things to do is to help people visualize what all of these complex founder-investor conversations look like. And my favorite one is dating. So imagine being a founder and doing a 2-minute pitch, and you're like, oh my God, this is scary, and how do I make it 2 minutes and all of that stuff, right? And then you get an investor to say, tell me more. That's your goal of a 2-minute pitch. So they say, tell me more, and you schedule a call with them and have a 30-minute conversation. You go, that was great. Why isn't there any investment? Well, if we use personal relationships as an analogy, the visual I want you to have is that you're at a bar and you walk up to a girl and you drop a pickup line. Hey, and that's your 2-minute pitch. And when she says, cool, you can buy me a drink, that's the 30-minute conversation with investors. You guys are not getting married, but when an investor gives you your investment, that's a marriage right there. You guys are building a long-term relationship and partnership. So if you are dropping a pickup line and the girl lets you buy a drink, you shouldn't expect that you're going to get married the next day. In fact, you haven't even gotten engaged yet. During the engagement, you're going to learn a lot of things about your partner that might make you say, ooh, we shouldn't get married. That's due diligence. That's a data room. That's when they go through all of the traction that you have gotten to prove the valuation that you have and that you're an investable company. That's when they prove they actually want to get married to you. Today, we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk a little bit about how the numbers that explain all of the work that you've done make it easy for an investor to go, yep, you're the one. I'm working with you. I'm going to give you the money. I'm going to give you my time. I'm going to give you my network, my community, my skills, and how all of those things are really, really important. So we can stop celebrating that the girl let you buy a drink.
So before we dive into this, guys, we will cover a couple of topics we talk about all the time, just so we're kind of clear. So the 4 capital categories are, you guys remember, public and gov funds is number 1. This is anything that started as taxpayer dollars. Number 2 is debt. There's 4 different types of debt. The different types of debt are based on how they're underwritten. If you have collateral, that's collateral-based funding. If you come with a contract, that's accounts receivable purchase order funding. If you have revenue of any kind or personal income, this is called cash flow-based funding. This is where most of the innovation has been in the debt space over the last 10 plus years. And then last but not least is credit-based funding. Credit-based funding is underwritten solely based on your credit. This is where I started building credit-based loans where we would fund startups 150 grand using their personal credit or using business credit or whatever. When we started doing this over 15 years ago, nobody was doing it. And it's what taught me what capital stacking actually is. And we'll get into that at some point. The third type of capital category is equity. This is what most of you guys are wired to think through when you're bringing your company to somebody you're trading equity. There's been some really smart people that have come in here. One of the guys, Rayon, has had 3 exits. His last one was 300 million. He realized that he should ask the investors what kind of a deal they would actually fund. And he structured it that way, and it was an equity debt split. Okay, it wasn't just straight equity. He was able to get people, he's a medical guy, that's what his area focuses out of Canada. And he was able to structure it that way. And literally, he got way more traction with those individual funders because he literally asked them, what would you actually be interested in funding? Last but not least is what we'd like to call raised revenue. Raised revenue is our term for large chunks of capital that can come into your business. I call it sponsored capital. But raising revenue is essentially saying, if there's a group that maybe would buy a $30,000 contract from you, what would it take for you to get into relationship, to do the discovery process, to deeply understand what it is that individual check writer would actually write you a check for, that would be north of 250, 300 grand. That's not equity. That's not debt. It's not equity. It's not debt. What is it? It's revenue into the business. This is the reason I call raising revenue. I was just with a founder at one of our pitch events last week. I don't know if you guys have seen the new content studio we have on the Strip. We're doing some really cool things over at Venture House that we're quite excited about and expanding into other cities as well. There is a founder that built a medical startup. I'd probably call it like a health tech startup more than anything else. And his first check into his company was several $1 million from MasterCard. No equity. No equity. Did he have to demonstrate traction? Yeah, for sure. And traction is two forms. As you start to listen to Elias, I want you to think about how Elias is using the traction inside of his business to attract opportunity and the traction inside of himself as a human being to attract opportunity. I would argue that kind of traction is more important. Part of the reason why we share the stage with some of the founders you just heard from is they show up. They show up for others and they show up for themselves. They're willing to take counsel. They're willing to take feedback. They're willing to listen, and they also know when to stick to their gut, right? Naira and I have this conversation around how much she should be concerned and worried about her business, right? There's a bit of paranoia that she carries with her, and I think all great founders are paranoid that they're coming after me. My competition's coming after me, which drives innovation, right? At the same time, she's got to make it through the distance, and so she has to know that at some point I've done everything I can do, and it has to be enough, right? So there's that sweet spot. So something to think about as we're talking through traction is what traction am I creating in my venture, which Sammy's really good at teasing out. And then there's the other part of what traction I'm creating in myself as a human being where people want to back, fund, and support me. And we make the distinction here that funding is when somebody gives you a check. Backing is when they say, hey, we're going to make sure you don't fail. And it's usually better than money because it usually includes money as well. When a large check writer actually wants to see this. By the way, I was going to give a shout out to Dave, but he left. But you guys should all be paying attention to Global Entrepreneurship Week that's coming the same week as F1. He's got some cool stuff happening. You guys know Dave Burley. We love like brothers. We fight like brothers. It's awesome. Anyway.
Community organizer issue for that as well.
Oh, love it, love it. Elias, Dave, so you guys know Dave. Just shout out to another founder that's also building community. Okay, with no further ado, one of our favorites, and by the way, we're going to have a little test, and whoever wins something. If you can figure out, no cheating, what nationality Elias is, and he's going to drop little hints throughout it. If you already know, that doesn't count. Okay. So he's going to drop little hints throughout his presentation. I want you guys to figure out what nationality he is from. What country is he from? All right, Mr. Elias Benjaloun with Techstars. So I want you to give us a little bit of background on two things. A, I want you to talk about how you got here, and then Techstart. And then I want you to give us a little bit of a breakdown of all the good, and it's okay, you can brag a little, you said it's okay, of what Promise Startups is up to and why this is important for the historic West Side, for Northern Vegas, and for diverse founders, and just for startup land in general.
Sweet. Hey, what's up, everybody? How y'all doing? Are you doing good? Pretty energized? All right, that's great. My name's Elias Benjaloun, and how I got here, that's a long story. I came to America when I was 2. I'm an immigrant from a country you'll figure out here in a little bit. But I grew up in America as a son of immigrant parents. And I like to share that story because most immigrants are entrepreneurs, right? So I grew up in an entrepreneurial
Damn
house.
straight.
Yeah. And sometimes it's because there's not another choice. But that's just the reality of the situation. So when I came to Vegas, I had this weird story, y'all. I graduated high school when I was 14 because I went to an online school. I go to UNLV at 15, but I was undocumented at the time, so I couldn't get any scholarships. And so I couldn't go to school unless I could find a way to pay my way through school. It was that lucky skill of web design that I happened to learn at 12 playing like Neopet sites that actually helped me pay my way through college and put me on a totally different trajectory in my life. And because of that experience, I've dedicated myself to bridging the digital divide because I see, what is possible when folks have access to technology. And I wouldn't be here without all the mentors that I had to get here, right? So I think that goes for number one. But after college, I got lucky enough to work for this company called Uber. After they got kicked out of Vegas for being assholes, they needed some nicer folks. I got to be one of those junior nicer folks to kind of rebuild relationships. Helped relaunch them in 2015, and then since then did a couple other venture-backed tech startups, a couple marketing agencies around the world. And what brought me to Nevada Partners and the community work I do there is once upon a time ago, after college, I got invited to go live in Tony Hsieh's Air Street Park. Rest in peace to Tony Shea. He's done so much for this community. And while I didn't get to know him very well personally, I was around his crew and around a lot of people who just poured into me. And it made entrepreneurship a lot less lonely. And it definitely accelerated the skills that I was able to accumulate. And so that's what led me to Nevada Partners, because I feel like we're missing that type of community, especially for disadvantaged groups, marginalized folks, that sort of stuff. And so we started that community 3 years ago.
So can you tell everybody real quick before we move on what people can expect from Promise Startups?
Yeah, so Promise Startups, it's called Promise Startups because it's based in a Promise neighborhood. There's like several hundred Promise neighborhoods around the country. These are neighborhoods that have seen massive disinvestment because of things like redlining, because of the way the I-15 was built around the country, that essentially choked out certain communities that happen to be communities that belong to people of color. And so Promise neighborhoods are designated neighborhoods around the country to kind of reverse this systemic racism. And we established Promise Startups to really focus on entrepreneurs that remind me a lot of my parents that are struggling to really get to generating several $100,000 in revenue. If you look at the district, which is 89106 and some of the others, some of the lowest income zip codes in Southern Nevada. So I thought it was really important that, while we're raising millions of dollars and we're spending billions of dollars on the Strip, that we create a pathway to, make sure that funding, gets diversified and equitably throughout the community. And so we do a monthly entrepreneurship conference. It's the first Saturday of every month. It's free to attend. We got food. We always buy from our local founders. We're going to start doing a Youthpreneur Expo and a resource fair. And it's 9 a.m. to like 3 p.m. There's a ton of cool stuff going on in there. And I'd love to invite each of y'all to be a part of that. Also, because of the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years, we not only got UNLV to give us funding to start an incubator called the Tourism Business Igniter, but we also recently received an endorsement and funding from Visa and some other national partners that helped us establish the West Side Community Incubator. And so y'all know we work, right? Well, we got free work on the West Side. So if y'all are looking for some co-working space, come on down, come build with us.
I absolutely love everything about what Elias has done. I was there at the Visa launch last week, or the week before. Time goes by really quickly. Can you just raise your hand if, having heard that, you're like, wow, that's traction, that feels good, that feels like you're really doing stuff? All right, I want to please keep your hands up. Can you keep your hands up if you can put a number and evaluation on how much that company is worth right now? All right, that's why I brought my notebook and my pen, because we're going to do a lot of numbers. Hi, my name's Sammy, and I'm the robot that's going to translate all of the words that you say into math and numbers.
Great, need that.
Elias, I'm going to ask you to start with something that's not related to what you're currently doing.
Sure.
I want you to go really big picture, really big vision, and I'll cheat and say I already wrote something down for you. I don't want you to think about what success looks like. Success is a really important thing for you to think about for your projects, because if you are successful, these metrics are going to be hit. And those metrics summarize everything that you're doing. So I'm going to ask you to start with what is success. The second thing I'm going to ask you for is a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, if you're familiar with that. If you're more of a touchy-feely person, another thing that I like saying is, what would be magical? Not just successful, but absolutely beautiful. If you start with what success looks like, what are those numbers?
Yeah, so great. And you asked numbers, but let me talk about big, hairy, audacious goals, because I think about that often. The biggest, hairiest, most audacious goals that I can think of, or the North Star for me, is how can we raise more families and communities out of poverty? How can we help people earn reasonable living, not just a reasonable living, but make a ton of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars? How can we help more people achieve that in their worlds? And I think a part of that requires disrupting the education system. So if you ask me like the biggest long-term life goal would be the education system needs to be disrupted. And I have a unique perspective because I was homeschooled, went to an online school, went to public school, private school, Christian school, and college at a really young age. And so I think the whole system needs to be disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. And we've had this conversation many times before. I know that your company has a marketplace where you're both looking to help people learn skills and be able to turn around and make profit as you apply those skills. Can you tell us more about that and what the business model is like?
Yeah, so let me be real. Marketplaces are super tough. There's this thing called marketplace liquidity, which pretty much means you need to have reliable supply and you need to have reliable demand in order to maintain good customer relationships that will result in word of mouth. So it's not easy to talk about launching a marketplace. You know, I've been working on that specific project for maybe 3 years, and I feel like year to date, we're going to facilitate like 5K in marketplace gigs, which is not a huge number. And so, yeah, marketplaces are definitely tough. Can you repeat your question, Sammy? I feel like I'm missing the mark.
I think you got a lot of it, and I'm specifically picking on the marketplace because it's not the heart of what he's focused his traction on so far. I want to do a future, like outward-looking stuff we have not currently done item.
Sure.
And so for the marketplace,
Yeah.
if you facilitate, let's say 5K,
Yeah.
what does that mean for your own personal profit?
Right. Well, the marketplace, you know, marginally does between like 50 and 30%. But the reason why marketplace in the first place is because if you look at Upwork and you look at Fiverr, I think Fiverr, the last time I checked, does about 300 million a year, which is incredible. And Upwork probably a lot more than that. And the reality is that digitalization is rapidly advancing in the world. It's growing every year. And folks that have the digital skills are out earning the rest of the world, right? And so I think that's an important trend. When I talk to a lot of other entrepreneurs, they talk about outsourcing to other communities. And I think outsourcing is powerful. I outsource as well. But I think there's something magical if we can create pipelines where people can learn and earn within the communities that they live in and then be plugged into that ecosystem.
So one of my favorite things to do is to work with purpose-driven entrepreneurs, and Elias is absolutely one of those. You will notice that the questions that I ask are really, really pointed because what he says feels good, but an investor is still not getting the answer that they need for the valuation they're trying to create. So what percentage, if you were to sell 100K of services on the marketplace,
Yeah.
what percentage do you take as profit for your business?
Yeah, so that's again the interesting part of the marketplace because we're paying for people to train up to a point where we can maintain high levels of customer satisfaction. And so, you know, on a bad number, it would be like 20%. And on a good number, it'd be closer to 50%. But actually, most of the revenue that I get through my company comes from our CRM. So we have an AI-powered CRM that we sell as a monthly recurring revenue play, and through our white glove service, which is called Techstart Your Business, and that's a implementation service. And that essentially operates like an agency that then interfaces with like the gig workers that we're hiring.
I am going to pivot to that part of your business because I know that's where all the traction lives. But before we do that, I just want to translate for everybody how incredibly powerful if you read between all the lines, and even more powerful if you just tell the investor this. Don't let the investors reach their own conclusions because they might not get this far. But I'm going to translate a couple of things really, really quickly. At the very beginning, Elias said that there are multiple promised neighborhoods all over the US. I'm going to use the number 1,000 for easy math. But if he had told me specifically what that number was, and that it was his dream to use this neighborhood as a pilot for every other promised neighborhood in the US, that's a big vision. And when we talk about these giant TAMs, that's what we're talking about. This giant vision that's not going to happen in the next year.
Total addressable market, TAM.
Thank you. Thank you. So if that's the big, big dream, this beautiful dream that is not going to happen in the next year, that is the reason why I am going to give you not just my money, but my backing, my time, my skill set, everything for this dream. What does that dream look like, and why is it profitable for us to spend all of our time and energy now building for it? If that number was 1,000, I'm still missing a couple numbers here, but let's say that specifically he's only going to focus on the marketplace. That's not the core of his business. I'm trying to show you something very, very future looking. And he earlier said several hundred thousands in revenue. For easy math, I'm going to use 1 million. Does that feel good?
Sure.
All right, so we want to help 1,000 neighborhoods generate $1 million of revenue. And let's say we want to do this on an annual basis, and that his take is going to be on the low end, 20%. I actually don't like doing all of this math in my head.
I think that's 200 million revenue.
I think so. I think that's 1 billion times 20%.
This is definitely the kind of math that entrepreneurs should be good at. Calculating your expenses is the not fun part, and the taxes too.
I still do all of this in a spreadsheet, honestly, just because that way I can change each of these assumptions and see what happens if it's actually 2,000 neighborhoods. What happens if we start with 100? And so the answer for this one was $200 million of revenue for his company. If what we're building is going to result in $200 million of ARR, while helping elevate 1,000 neighborhoods that have been impoverished for quite a few times because of our own doing as a nation, wouldn't that be amazing and beautiful? Isn't that something worth asking for an investment for? If you came to me and said, hey, I need $100 million because in 5 years, we're going to build a company that's going to have $200 million of ARR and have this impact on our nation. It's not tell me more. It's I would be embarrassed not to say tell me more. I would be embarrassed not to give you an hour of my time. I would be embarrassed not to give you any connection that I have. Let's not even talk about money yet. Money is the easy part of this.
So if we're talking about this idea of dating, if that's the kind of the container we're inside of when it comes to founders, trying to date with their investors, we can talk about business model, which we'll do in a minute, but also you have to make sure that they're a match, right? Funder market fit, funder fit for your company based on, so if they're a VC, they need to return capital in 10 years. So when I talk about sponsored capital, sponsored rev, and all that, VCs don't write those kinds of checks. They can't. They're using somebody else's money. They're not the decision maker. They're temporarily the broker and the decision maker, but they have to return capital within 10 years, right? You're dealing with somebody else, a single check writer. They can do whatever they want. One of the guys that I know calls this patient capital. Patient capital, these are people that can take as long as it takes because they're at the legacy stage of their lives, right? They're family offices, right? So coming back to this, the reason why this is important is it's important to understand when you're sharing your vision that you're sharing it with somebody that's a match for the business model that you're building, right? So when we talk about capital stack is what different capital types and capital partners am I going to stack into my business in one time at the moment of funding, and then over time daisy chain what capital types, capital relationships, capital resources over time. That's capital sequencing. And these are the things, by the way, guys, that we're going to be automating in the fundraising process. The reason why you guys show up for Pitch Kung Fu every single week online, the reason you guys come to the fundraising fluency courses that we do online is because even when I automate the introductions to you, you still must be prepared to pitch. And being prepared to pitch means you actually have to be attractive as a founder. And then when an attractive founder pitches, it's well received by investors to say, oh, you're asking me if I'll be yours. Okay, sounds good. Let's do this. Let's dance, right? Let's do this dance together. So it's really, really important to understand that. Even when I automate the introduction process and I pair and match you, you still have to pitch. Every single capital type will expect you to pitch them. Still, because they have to do their own due diligence on you. Even if we've handed it to them on a silver platter and it's in thesis for them, they still are going to say, okay, I need to get to know this founder.
Yeah, if I could jump in with some reactions there. So I'm very core values driven entrepreneur, right? As in, like, if folks don't match with the core values, then I can already see the negative long term for why it's not going to work, as in it's going to take away energy from the team or cause some problems in the future. So I'm very core values based in terms of getting aligned with my clients. And I can say that some of my clients would make for great investors too, because they do, M&A, so mergers and acquisitions. They're in the business of, building and, standing up companies. But where I'm at right now is, there's an alignment in the core values, and how can I go raise revenue? How can I get that 5K in facilitated gigs up to 50K? And the strategy that I'm pursuing at the moment is raising revenue with the right community partners, with the right clients. And then once we have a system that is more profitable and a story that we can share that actually demonstrates some success here in our neighborhoods here in Las Vegas, then I would be more ready to invest and to seek investors. And again, I planted relationships that hopefully will be some of those folks. But the reason why I'm really, tiptoe around investors, my first investor for a project I had, I was probably like 18. Totally everything that could have gone wrong, went wrong. And I'll just leave it at that much.
So one last thing before we get back into the heart of this traction conversation is business models. And this is something we're going to be releasing a lot of content. You and I talked about this like 9 months ago. We're going to be releasing a lot of content that breaks down business models. When you're a founder, your business model could mean you're building an entirely different business with the same vertical, right? So there could be 2 fitness professionals in here. Let's say one of them is a fitness trainer and basically has to show up at the gym. That's not a very investable business, because there's no leverage. You're basically the star of the show. You have to show up. You're trading time for dollars. You're basically a glorified employee, and you bought yourself a job. Then you can move to a business model where you actually have online marketing, you have an Instagram account, and you have a back-end value ladder that essentially leads people to informational products that are high margin, right? Then it's a matter of how much money can I spend on marketing versus the marketing multiple I've created in my business. And then I can hire people to basically offer diet plans or whatever, right? So that's another business model. Then you've got James, who says, I actually want to build a franchise model where I have physical locations, and my, again, business model choice, I'm choosing a user that is a little bit more upwardly mobile. Maybe they're like a triathlete, or they're somebody that's a busy executive and doesn't have a lot of time, and so they're going to go train for 15 minutes at a time while I take them to their genetic potential. You see how these little decisions make a really big impact on who you're going to raise from, how you're going to build the business, and the traction you're going to find in the numbers that actually matter. Business model matters greatly. There's other people that are working on the fundraising challenge problem that are not building the same business model as we are. We've learned the hard way through different situations what model founders are likely to accept. And I'm always asking, what would you pay for? What would you pay for? What would you pay for?
Yeah, I just want to react really quickly. Something that Bill Gurley shared, and he was one of the early investors of Uber. I think he was the chair of the board, and he was also
Airbnb.
Airbnb.
And WeWork.
Yep, and also InstaWork, and I helped launch InstaWork here in Vegas. And one of the things that was a mantra in those companies was to do things that don't scale in order to do things that do scale. Sometimes we don't have all of the data in front of us to make a decision on the business model. And so if you are stagnant, I would say just do things even if they're not scalable, so you can collect data to then inform what is.
And this is the reason why we can always tell when you have not had your first 100 client conversations.
Right.
There's no faking this. You need to know more than the person you're sitting across the table from. The funder is making a decision to let you take their money on a journey, and you're the visionary, and you need to know the most in the room about how your clients are operating. You need to know, like, definitively that her name is Tiffany. She's 30 years old. You know, she's a triathlete. She has 2 cars in the garage. She has 2 kids. This is what she spends money on. These kinds of things to understand your avatar.
I love that you mentioned that, and I was actually looking at the data right before this so that I could talk about it. I use a calendar automation system just so that I can book more appointments, whether those are support tickets, demos, networking calls, community meetings, etc. And I looked at the all time to date. So I started my company February 2022, and I've done over 1,100 meetings since then, right? And so I definitely recommend using some sort of calendar automation tool, because not only does it let you track that number, but also follow up with everybody in your database. Now I think I have like 2,800 people in my database that I can continuously email.
So what did that do for your instincts? Like 1,100 at-bats, guys.
Oh,
What does that do for your
tons.
instinct around what the user wants, what they feel, what they'll pay for, what their pain problem is? When you can describe, when you're the online trainer, and you can describe to the single mom with 5 kids, because you have 5 kids, exactly her pain point, and you also hold the solution, she's going to say, here's my credit card.
Right. Yeah. I think you put it succinctly enough. I mean, once you've done enough interviews with your customer, you're going to start identifying the different types of customers. And in my business, I have different types of offers for different types of customers. And that's just the way that I build my business. I probably wouldn't recommend that. That's not the best strategy in the world. But the reason why I did that is because not everybody can afford the high-ticket implementation service that is the bread and butter. And so we have created different sets of offers depending on, to meet people where they're at.
Oh my God, we have so many recurring themes here. I'm just going to take a tiny brief pause, and I don't want to deep dive valuations here because valuations are really complex. I'm going to do a series on LinkedIn, so you can find it there. I have an overview on valuations. But if you can just visualize this, when you go on the stock market and you try to buy Google stock, there's a stock price, there's a total number of shares. If you multiply those 2 numbers, you get the total value of Google. When founders raise money, whatever percentage equity for whatever dollar amount, that's the valuation you are currently raising at. This number is not arbitrary. We're going to back into it. And we're going to go through everything that's being said the same way that we did before. Elias speaks English. I translated that into what an investor is looking at from a due diligence perspective. And this is the type of investor that I am. This is the type of way that I make decisions. Every investor is going to be a little different, right? The 3 specific things that we are trying to do in this conversation. 1, we are going to find the 3 bullet points for what is the most powerful traction Elias has gotten in his business today. If he tells an investor these 3 bullet points, they're going to go, wow, you are a serious executor. If I was going to give somebody money to go make more money, I want it to be you. We're going to find 3 bullet points. They might not all be numbers, but we're going to go figure out what those are together. Then 2, we're going to figure out a big picture vision. It won't be exactly the same as the one that I used as an example, but we're going to find what is it that we would be willing to take investment in. Because if he were to keep doing what he's doing, it's going to keep being amazing. So why would he go get an investor? When he said what type of investor he would be willing to work with, why does that investor want to work with him? Why would he accept their money and give up equity? What does pouring gasoline on the fire look like? That's the second thing we're going to figure out. And the third thing is, in order to call that investor in, what are the 3 pieces of traction he can focus on in the next 90 days to be like, when that investor comes to find me, here's the 3 that I did to get up to here. Here's the 3 that I'm working on, so it'll be even better next time. That is going to be the goal of our next segment.
And by the way, guys, whether you're raising or not, these are very pertinent conversations because you should want to move your startup forward. You should want to be bringing in revenue. You should be wanting to find traction, whether you raise or not. And again, you're always raising, you're always marketing and selling, and you're always recruiting for your company. No exceptions. It is so competitive out there, you cannot stand still. So for any of you guys thinking, oh, well, I guess I don't need to pay attention because I'm not trying to raise right now. You do, unless you just don't care that you're growing a business and should probably go back to being an employee or doing something else because you're not going to make it. What's going to happen over the next several months is we're going to see layoffs. They're coming, and it's not going to just be in the tech industry. You're going to see the results of bad management on behalf of our country when it comes to money. You can't increase the supply of something and expect that it's not going to have an effect. So any of you guys that are building businesses, you need to be real serious because what's going to happen is we've got baby boomers wanting to get rid of their businesses, hundreds of thousands of them, with no one to buy them. And what's going to happen, as Warren Buffett likes to say, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And there's going to be a bunch of business owners that thought they had a great business, but they were soft peddling. They were soft peddling. And that's okay, but if you set up a business in a way where the margin's not going to be there, or the controls are not there, or whatever, it's going to be a really tough situation. Now, the flip side of that, since let's be positive, is we're about to go through the next, and it's the biggest now, there's been some big ones, wealth transference we've ever seen. That's coming, big time. And you absolutely should plan to be a part of it. Just because the economy's a certain way or bad doesn't mean your personal economy has to be that way.
Right, yeah, real quickly on the soft pedaling, I totally agree with that. One of the classes I had the opportunity to do was with Reforge, which is like a growth marketing specialist program, and Andrew Chen was one of the instructors, and he was one of the early like GMs for helping launch Uber, I think in San Francisco, something like that. Anyways, he said something that really stuck with me. You know, that was beyond growth viral loops. That's a really exciting thing. But if the company is stagnant, it's on its way to death, right? And so soft pedaling and being okay with not growing is a sign to do, right? And so that's just something I always think about in terms of how we're moving forward.
Okay, number time. I'm such a little robot. Isn't it fun? We're gonna go data mine. I do this so often. Like if you've ever met me at an event, I will ask you a question because I'm constantly doing in-person surveys. And so we're gonna start with this in-person survey. Elias, I'm gonna ask you for the item that you are the most proudest of, if you were trying to prove traction and investability that you're just like the right person to give money to, what is the first thing that you would tell an investor or any person?
Yeah, I guess there's two things because it would depend on who I'm talking to. So, you know, one side of the coin is that I really do prioritize the community that we serve, and I think that uniquely, you know, the importance of being embedded into a community is that you get to see the folks in your community every day. You get to see your customers every day. You get to see what they're struggling with, and you can start building products and services around them. I think that's the most important thing to do. I was listening to Alex Hormozi and the president of Shopify talk recently, and Shopify is a $100 billion company today, and the president of that company was one of Shopify's first customers, right? And so being your own customer, being in the community of your customers, I think is one of the most important, and we do that at TechStart. We're all about that. The second thing I would say is we're currently at 200-ish clients, and something that I've been working on is automating more within our business. So for the you're going to hate me for saying this, I'm a technologist, but I set up the automation for our onboarding about 6 months ago, or actually more than that, 11 months ago. It was like last March. And in the year 2023, since then, we have automatically onboarded 20 customers, but year to date, January, February, we've done 30 customers automatically. So I would point to that as traction that could be invested in.
I am writing down so many numbers. I also pulled some from earlier that you talked about. And what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and figure out which of these is the sexiest. What number is the most secret sauce? What number would other entrepreneurs go, how did you do that? I want you on my team just so you can show me that. So I have my phone out because I'm not doing all of these numbers in my head. And I will also say clarity is super, super important. So I'm going to pick on one of his numbers. He said 2,800 contacts, and you said 1,100 meetings. The lack of clarity here means I don't know if those meetings were meetings with the same person or meetings with first-time potential customers.
Super great point, because it's definitely a mixed bag. There's definitely a lot of repetitive meetings, and if we look deeper into the data, which I haven't done, there's probably a story to be told in terms of how many networking calls or demo calls before we have client calls, and then how many client calls that we have per contract. So those are definitely numbers that we could double click into. But
So if you have a law business, would this be valuable to know how many conversations are converting? Think about your business. Think about the time that you're personally spending interfacing. Is that converting to cash flow? Is that converting to quality relationships that help the business in some other way? Maybe it's intangible. Whether it's me, one of the biggest things that you can attract is channel partners that again and again and again bring additional business. These are things to be thinking about as you're hearing these numbers, and ask yourself, do you have any idea to quantify or even qualify the quality of what it is that you're creating and the energy and the output that you're putting in?
Yeah, and channel partners have helped that number of
Channel
so channel partners are the right type of partner that can introduce you to a bunch of other customers. So for example, if you're a lawyer and you're, or a better example might be if you're a chiropractor and you're providing personal injury services, then you're going to want to partner with a lawyer, a personal injury attorney, who then is the first person that somebody's going to call when they have back pain because they were in a car accident. And so you want to bring on multiple law firms as your partner, being a chiropractor, because each law firm could be worth 10 to 100 customers over a year versus the one customer. So I started putting on channel partners, and in my case, my channel partners are like small business advocacy groups such as SCORE or the local chambers of commerce, and that has definitely helped just accelerate exposure for sure.
So we may not be able to do all the things we wanted to do, but that is okay. I do still want to focus on a couple of items. And one of the things that's most powerful about using Elias for this example is I'm picking on a bunch of numbers he happens to have, because that's what his business does. It helps you set up the technology so that you can track all of these numbers and understand these things. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you can tell me how many people know about your business that you introduced to your business in the last month?
Half a hand?
Yeah, but Sorrel uses our tech too, so.
So
Okay.
if you don't know how many people were exposed to it, you wouldn't know what percentage of those people converted. So you wouldn't know if your sales funnel is effective, let alone more or less effective than last month. It's like we're flying these businesses blind. I definitely invite you to chat with Elias to learn more about the technology that he's using in his business as well. He will be doing another session where he shows a little bit more of that right after lunch. But to show you the power of that, I'm going to use the number of meetings as a total, because that's going to create something incredibly sexy. It's going to make every single one of us say, if that's true, I need you to explain to me how you did that. If he met 2,800 people, and got 1,100 of those people to set up an initial sales call with him, that would be a 39% conversion rate. If 39% of the people who knew about your offer said, I want you to try and sell that to me right now, I think I need you, we would say, what did you tell them? And how can I do the same?
For sure. So I would just say that, of the 2,800 folks, where I got those contacts are a combination between LinkedIn, networking events, the digital card system, it works. People enter the database immediately. It's instantly converting or offline relationships into online relationships.
And so you tap that to somebody's phone.
Yep, and can hook you up with one if you want one. But, not just that, the funnel that's connected to the digital card is on my Facebook and LinkedIn and across websites, right? So everything is kind of digitally engineered to bring leads into the system. And then the conversion rate would be the 2,800 to 200 customers. That's where we're at the moment. And so, I'm not a challenger type of salesperson. My approach is let's just create tons of value for people. And when they're in a position to need more value and to invest value, then they'll become a customer.
So of course I calculated that number. 200 out of 2,800 contacts is 7.1%. And not knowing anything about any industry or any process, the number that I'm going to benchmark against is if I were to talk to 100 people, I would expect about 5%, 5 people to close. And if I do better than that, what it means is I'm doing better than average at finding who the right customer is, convincing them. And if I understand all of the numbers in between there, I can explain which part of it I'm doing really well. My secret sauce is attracting the right customer because we do such strong community events that I just am better at getting people who are stronger, warm leads. So we have to do less marketing, spend less money, spend less time. That's why you should give me your investment.
How many of you guys have talked to 200 investors for your startup? Rick? There's two people out of all of you guys. James?
All two or?
Yeah, so if you think about that, guys, the average amount that any large unicorn that you've heard of for each round is 200. And let's also talk about the quality of those tends to be high. So if the quality of the people you're talking to, and I generally think people should start with ones that are less valuable so they can practice, build up speed, build confidence, understand the objectives, understand the objections, I should say. And then you build up to the ones that are the strongest in the middle and towards the end. But again, 200, right? That's a lot to get 3, 4, 5, 7, right? That's what the big boys and girls do. There's no exceptions. There is no skipping the middle. Like this is something that people think that they pitch one person and they're on board. That happens on occasion, but it's not something I would ever risk the success of my startup on. Yes, we talk about visionary investors and finding somebody that'll go out and bring other investors in. And we had a family office that came to town that brought a bunch of founders to our last pitch event. You could tell how proud they were of their founders. It was awesome to watch them just like trying to almost push other people to invest with them, right? Because they don't want to invest alone. But again, it is numbers, and you have to be prepared for that. It's the same thing with dating, so no surprise.
And if you can't track your numbers, you can't do this analysis, and you can't brag to investors. So if you're not tracking your numbers today, please come talk to Elias. He's tracked all of these in his own system. You can do it as well. I want to do one fun example. Oh, please.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. Tracking numbers is not just important for tracking numbers for the sake of your business or investor relationships. There are government partners that I have, nonprofit partners that I have who track those numbers so that we can help them, report out on whatever programming we do, right? And so there's multiple stakeholders in your own business, and it's really important to be able to justify the asks that you're coming to the table with. And the best way to do that is with you put in this and you get that.
So we're talking about real numbers that are tracked inside your business to create traction inside your business. The other theme I wanted you to be thinking about is how you can actually measure what matters when it comes to yourself, the traction you're creating with yourself. Shout out to John Doerr, legendary investor, invested in Google and a bunch of other massive companies. He wrote a book called Measure What Matters. And in that, he talks about the idea of an OKR. And an OKR is objectives, key results. Now, what makes an OKR different than a regular goal or a KPI, key performance indicator, right, is that there's a portion of it that's aspirational, which means that the goal is such a stretch for you that it's designed to fail 20% of the time. So these are things where you're like, I know I can do it, or I think I can do it, and I'm committed to doing it. I'm not just interested. I'm going to make it happen, but It's gonna stretch me. That's an OKR. Just so you guys understand. Dave, you had a really quick comment.
Oh yeah, I just attended the Hermosi workshop. I dropped 10 G's on that, so you guys don't have to.
Great.
The two biggest takeaways.
Yeah.
When they talked about investors, they're looking at metrics.
Yep.
In sales, right? The best data is, or the best capital is revenue.
Yep.
From their perspective.
100%.
And then the big takeaway was data is dope.
Okay, so for those that didn't hear that, data is dope, and that sales, metrics are most important. This was Dave. That was just at Alex Hermosi's last summit.
Scaling workshop.
Yeah, scaling workshop. Shout out to awesome entrepreneurs that live in Vegas.
What I just heard Dave say is that he spent 10 grand to learn what we're telling you here today. That feels good, right? Wouldn't we love more metrics like that in our own businesses? I want to talk about absolute and relative really quickly, and I'm also going to pivot to trying to let Elias talk about as much of this himself, do a lot of this analysis himself, because he also knows his own numbers very well, much better than I do. And because what I'm trying to say is this isn't hard. All of you guys can do this for your own businesses, and what's more important is awareness. If you don't even know that this is what you should be trying to do, or that it's an opportunity for you to do this analysis, how are we going to go to put in the effort and the money to go track all of the numbers, do all of the analysis, and make all of the growth happen? So when I talk about absolute, that 7.1% conversion rate of contacts to clients is an absolute analytic. What I'm looking at is, compared to all other businesses, is this really sexy? Is this something where I'm like, whoa, I gotta learn how to do that? It's kind of hard sometimes to be absolutely the best. To be like, yeah, you know what? I'm better at Uber than this. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna wanna learn from you. But we all have to start somewhere. And sometimes the number that's gonna be most amazing is going to be relative sexiness. Relatively, this year compared to last year, I might have had such amazing growth. You really need to come learn what I've learned in the last year. So one of the things that Elias teased was automated onboardings. And again, what you choose to measure is what you're going to focus your energy on. What you focus your energy on should be your secret sauce, and that's what you should be sharing with investors. So I'm going to turn this over to Elias and ask him to share what he thinks are some areas that he's really grown a lot. Two of the ways to do this is year over year. This year relative to last year, we grew our automated onboardings by 100%. Month over month, this month relative to last month, I was able to schedule 20% more meetings with 30% more conversion. All of those feel really, really good.
So real quick, as we get into Elias sharing, I want you guys to be in your own head about how this relates to what you're working on. I want this to be personalized to you. What we see a lot at the Pitch Kung Fu sessions and all the pitch events that we run is founders delay trying to go out and getting sales, going out and getting client feedback, finding out exactly what customers and would-be customers are willing to spend dollars on. It's real when they give you their money. So there's a book that I would highly recommend. I can make it available. A new friend of mine wrote named Noah Coggin. He's out of Austin, and he wrote a book called $1 Million Weekend. How do you create $1 million business in a weekend? Something he's done 8 times. He's created 7- and 8-figure businesses, all created within 48 hours. No delay. And no surprise, it's all focused on getting early traction and not letting the weekend go by without actually creating revenue by getting your first customers in 48 hours. How many of you guys have been waiting too long to create your first customers? I cannot tell you what this discipline does in not launching a business and waiting 6 months to get clients and customers. You need to get customers and clients immediately, whether you're going to raise or not. I promise it'll make your valuation better. It'll make it easier to raise, especially in the current environment that we're in. And just for commentary on the current environment, people are being funded every day. Don't let that be an excuse. People are being funded every freaking day. You can be one of them, or you can say, look, I'm going to fund myself. I'm going to make sure I have client revenue.
Yeah, you know what? Just really quickly on Noah Kagan, because he was one of the first digital marketers I ran into when I was like a 13, 14-year-old, and actually did his 48-hour challenge to launch a beef jerky store. He did a case study back then, and I called up my high school teachers like, hey, I'm doing this thing during my break before college. Can you buy some beef jerky for me? And I just sold like $100 of beef jerky. It wasn't a big deal.
Love beef jerky.
But that mindset of revenue first and build the rest later has always stuck with me because, again, it's super important to get sales. Otherwise, you don't really have a business in the first place. I keep, another piece I wanted to talk about was the value exchange, right? I just bought a soda here that was probably more expensive than buying a soda at the gas station across the street. But I was willing to part ways with a couple bucks there because the value exchange was well worth it for me to not have to go across the street. Ultimately, that's what sales is about. Are you creating enough value for the person that you're trying to sell something to? If you're not, the answer is going to be no. But if you're creating immense value, then the answer is most likely going to be yes. That's why, I'm not in a position trying to raise money right now because I'm working on raising revenue to raise the value of my business, and I have relationships with investors that it will be a no-brainer situation is what I guess anticipate. It's not as easy as that because you have to create the value for exchange, and we do that every day with our customers. Whenever somebody decides to send us a couple $1,000 to do their marketing, it's because they anticipate that they're going to at least 10x.
See how he's building the relationship now into the future? So he's being very, very patient with the relationships. I love it when founders expect to just date and get married overnight. They meet me yesterday and they're like, hey, give me an angel investor. Will you
That's
invest?
the worst. I don't want to get married tomorrow with somebody I barely know. Like, I've done that and it doesn't work.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull us back in. I'm always gonna do this because I'm using the investor brain. When we talked about venture capitalists not being able to support the model of let's give someone money just because it's nice, it's because they have a fiduciary duty. They are legally tied to make sure that the numbers of your business make sense for investment. That's the brain that I have on right now. And so even though Elias is doing classic CEO stuff, beautiful vision, really making people feel connected, building that relationship, building communities, I'm pulling it back to these numbers because if these numbers don't match, I don't get to make an investment. And it's not about today, it's not even about tomorrow. It's about saying, hey, this is tied to your valuation. And if we can't find 3 numbers that are beautiful today because they're so amazing, we can find the 3 best ones. And then we can figure out what the 3 we're gonna work towards in the next 90 days are.
For sure. I think the main one that I'm going to continue to work on in the short term that's going to bring the most amount of yield, being that, I'm an automated based business, and I recommend, this like labor transfer of wealth that we're going to see is that like more automated based businesses are going to outperform the rest. I've really thought about this. Let me paint this picture. When I first started my business, I was doing things that don't scale just to get some traction, just to get things going. So onboarding every customer manually, and I onboarded 150 folks manually. The amount of hours that went into that just to set up their account, if it was at least an hour each, it's 150 hours. But this year I onboarded 30 customers, and that was probably across 3 hours for the 30 because I did group sessions.
You cannot automate what you do not understand.
Yes.
You cannot automate what you do not understand.
But let me add to that, which is I spent 150 hours doing the manual work, and my mindset shift has been if I spend 150 hours developing automations, however many hours it took me to develop the onboarding automation, that goes on to work for me for hundreds of hours into the future. And so my mindset has been towards like, what are the other areas that I should be automating within my business so that I could get better conversion rates, better arbitrage on marketing spend, because I don't think I have those numbers right now. So the metric I'm looking at is what am I automating? How much time am I spending automating versus doing the manual work? But I wouldn't know what to automate without having done some of the manual work.
I love that so much. And the word to Google for that is leverage. How can I build something once, this automated system, to then be able to use it so many more times? Can you share some of those numbers again? You said that you spent 3 hours to onboard 30 customers. Is that right?
Yeah,
How long did it take you beforehand?
an hour per customer.
Okay, so 10 times faster in this method. That's really nice. And super quick is, as an investor in your 2-minute pitch, I'm looking for why you as a founder, why me as an investor, why am I the person that you want the money from because we have the right relationship, and why now? So if Elias were to come to me and say, the reason you should invest in me now is because I just figured out how to onboard customers 10 times faster, and therefore taking your money now will help me scale meaningfully. I'm like, oh, your valuation's lower than it will ever be. Can I do it now?
So one other thing I'll mention as far as traction, I personally want to see every time because I've had to write enough checks where I then have to step in beyond the capital process and start figuring out how you're going to acquire clients. I want to hear what your GTM is. I want to know what your go-to market strategy is to launch the entire company, how you're going to get out of the blocks, and how that directly relates to your ability to acquire clients. If you do not have traction, okay, fine. Tell me how you're in your pitch, in your 2-minute pitch, How are you planning to acquire customers? Because capital does not fix that. Your inability to sell and market is not fixed by capital. I want to say this over and over and over. And this will make a really big difference in the companies I look to fund this year, whether or not you can show me that you know how to acquire customers.
Yeah, fantastic point. So the way I've been acquiring a lot of my customers has been word of mouth, referrals, which to me is the most important thing because again, I wanted to make sure by building this marketplace that my customers had just amazing satisfaction, that they would stay with me for long periods of time, that they would refer other people to me. So word of mouth, podcasting has been another really interesting channel, unique channel for me for putting myself into new communities to acquire new customers. But the challenge I'm actually facing right now goes back to that marketplace liquidity, the liquidity challenge of labor. And I've talked to lots of people of different ways to approach it, but the approach that I decided on is how can I automate as much of the operational fulfillment? How can I start automating operations, automating marketing, automating sales, so that I can turn these centers into a lot more profitable than they are? Because right now, I'm not even running Facebook ads at the moment because I'm concerned about my operational fulfillment because I want to maintain that 99% customer satisfaction score that brings referrals. If I run a ton of ads and I get a bunch of customers and I can't serve those customers, my satisfaction goes down, reputation goes down. And so my priority at the moment is automating operations and then marketing and sales. And then once those areas are semi-automated and liquidity is a better story, then I would be like, hey, let's get $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million to invest in Facebook ads and TikTok or Google, etc.
So we are clearly doing a crash course of this today, and we would do a lot more detail if we were actually prepping, if I was working with you one-on-one, any of those things. But what I want to close with in these last few minutes is I would love for us to not just find 3 things in Elias's business that he's going to go track, he already has these metrics, and focus on growing in the next 90 days. But if we could pick some things that this community right here can help you with. Like if you were to say, I want to do 20% more contacts in 3-month periods in the next 90 days than I have in the last 90 days, I think this group of people can help make that happen.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'd love to go on a podcasting sprint. So anybody who wants a platform to share a little bit about the work that you're doing, if you have questions that we can exchange, or if you feel like you can ask me questions, that's something I love to do all the time, every day. We have a podcast studio in the Westside Incubator, and we also own the YouTube channel Entrepreneurs News Network. So we want to definitely showcase y'all.
Name 2 other things that they could serve and help you with.
Come out to the Promise Startups Conference, bring 2 types of folks that can benefit from the services we offer and folks that can contribute to the services that we offer, right?
That's awesome. Do you have any other thoughts? Okay, also, while he's sharing, anybody here want to come down and ask a question? Anybody have questions related to their traction, creating it? They want to come down here. We have to put you on the microphone so everybody can hear it. Shout out to Shaq from GoEd here. We love having our government here in Nevada here, and also Chris from Rebel Venture Fund. Good to have you here as well. Any questions? There's got to be a few.
I have numbers.
Come on down. Come down.
I have numbers.
Quickly.
I have so many numbers. He just said 2 things, right?
Succinctly. Question.
The first question is,
We're into the mic.
what was the name of the company that you represented?
Yeah, my company is TechStart, and you can find it at techstart.ai.
Promised
Oh, so the nonprofit side is Promise Startups.
Startups, okay. And the second thing is not a question, but a comment. If I was a software developer, this would be awesome. I'm in the project business for infrastructure, and I feel lost.
First off, I'm not a software developer. I'm a software implementer. Like, we have to take the tech, our phones, our cameras, our laptops, and maximize the revenue that we're getting off of that. And that, again, goes back to the digital equity work we're doing on the West Side. And so if you feel like there's a gap between technology implementation and where you're at, come out to our co-working space and benefit from some of the collisions, or book time with me, and I'll happily give you like a 30-minute crash course.
Awesome.
I want to do the numbers. Yes, please come up with questions.
Just a super quick question. So you said that we're on the precipice of, Kurt said, you said that the precipice of, I think you said, the greatest wealth transfer in the last whatever years. So could you elaborate, please?
Ever. Okay, couple things. So we saw what the internet did, and we saw how long it took to mature, right? 25 plus years. We saw what blockchain did, and it's still maturing. I think blockchain was the biggest invention since the internet, but it is moving much more slowly than the latest invention, which is AI. Any of you guys that are not paying attention, AI has already changed the world, and it will change it in ways you cannot even imagine because of the access. Not everybody has access to blockchain. Not everybody understands how it works. But look at the kids that are learning how to be prompt engineers using AI. And what we understand AI to be is going to be something completely different. The guy that created AI, kind of the grandfather of it, DeepMind with IBM, wrote a book. I can't remember what it's called, The Next Wave. I have it. I can send it to you. It could be really gnarly if you think about what this technology in the hands that want to do harm is going to do. It will do it, and the opportunity for you to do more by doing less and focusing more on the thing that you were born to do. So the opportunity for wealth creation is incredible in that way. Also, economically speaking, we have some very interesting real estate trends based on what was built, supply, demand, and based on baby boomers retiring, and based on kind of the market cycle. The market wants to recorrect itself in the United States every 8 to 10 years. We had 2008. But what's happened is we've kicked the can down the road, right or wrong or whatever, left or right, whatever. We've basically increased the monetary supply 40% of all money that's ever been created in the United States. There will be after effects for that. And you guys are seeing it now. How many of you guys see it when you go buy Thai food? How many of you guys see it when you buy anything? Is it that the pricing actually went up? No, it's that the value of the money went down. And so you have to understand that it's going to create effects as there's uncertainty in the market, and it is coming 100%. It's already happening.
Can I also add to that?
Yeah.
So first off, now I'm craving Thai food. So
Yes.
Okay. But anyways, to put it in a different way, like let's say as a marketing consultant, I earn $50 an hour, right? And so I can take my next 40 hours and I can go build an automation that will go do 200 hours of work for me, right? And so you see how that 40 hours that was worth $2,000 is now worth $10,000. AI puts like ridiculous gasoline on that fire. 100 hours becomes like 1,000,000 hours of output. That's the labor transfer that's happening where people don't even have to work to earn. But the reality is 90% of us are not even aware of that.
Think about what's going to happen with influencers. I can't quite name the name, but there's an influencer you guys would all know, one of the greatest entertainers that's currently around. And they're starting to rethink their whole strategy. They're realizing they need to become an entrepreneur. They need to be a tech founder. They need to relaunch themselves with AI, with blockchain, with community, with crowdfunding, right? They're starting to realize in order to stay relevant, what is going to happen to content creators because of AI is going to be big.
Digital cloning.
We have a partnership with the guy that created Google AdWords. This guy's been at the forefront of media technology for almost 30 years. And he's been coming out to Vegas because he sees the upside that we see in bringing LA together with Vegas and sharing our content studio spaces. He also believes that celebrities are going to get wiped out. Huge followings are going to matter nothing. So, it's interesting. If you think about cannabis, for example, this is a similar situation. Supply and demand don't change just because you change the medium. So, for example, I always knew that there would be brands that knew how to build a brand and thus be valuable in a cannabis perspective, even though the quality of the product was no different. So this is going to continue to be something you should think about as AI starts to flatten the entry into markets. So when we talk about economics, there's this idea of a barrier to entry. It's very difficult to get into the airline business, right? Because the planes are super expensive and the margins are freaking tiny. One of the reasons why network marketing is so popular with new entrepreneurs is because the cost to get into it's like $500 or $1,000. They don't treat it like a franchise that can make $1 million, and so most people are not successful with it. On the flip side, if you treat your startup like you only put $500 in it, you will not be successful. Whereas if you treat it like something that's going to carry you, your employees, the clients, and the investors into the future and create huge amounts of value and create huge returns, that is what you will most likely get, or you'll pivot to something that does do that.
I want to talk about the flattened barrier of entry for a lot of folks. I've been a digital marketer and entrepreneur for a decent amount of time. And flashback 10 years ago when I was living in the Airstream Park with my first startup idea, I lacked the software implementation skills, the developer know-how to be able to launch an app. But because of ChatGPT, the app that I'm going to demo later today, I was able to build it with the help of ChatGPT. I would not have been able to do that even 2 years ago.
So AI, in the short term, is going to replace people that have jobs with somebody else using AI. But it's going to do a whole lot more than that. If you think of the creative destruction, which is that Joseph Schumpeter came up with this term as an economist, of how capitalism reinvents itself, right? This was Blockbuster giving way to Netflix, right? So you have to think the speed at which these businesses are moving and the innovation is moving is steadily increasing, and yet the barrier to entry is falling. So now you're competing against a much more global marketplace. You have people from where you're from that are now able to compete with maybe less formal education with people that are here in the United States, and guess what? They're hungry.
Yeah.
They're working like immigrants. They're willing to do whatever is required to be successful because their entire lives and their families are dependent.
Can I share something on that? I introduced a new core value for myself and for my team earlier this year. I want to share with all of y'all. And if you have some feedback afterwards, I'd love to hear how this landed with y'all, because I don't think it lands super well all the time. The value is heart and hustle. And what that means is to put your heart into the hustle that you're in fully, but in a way where your hustle is in alignment with your heart, so that you can have compassion with yourself, your team, your clients, your community. Right now, we can't be soft pedaling in this economy. We have to go hard. If we are not where we want to be in our business, and given everything that's going to happen in the next 2 years, you want to put yourself in a position. So find that heart and hustle.
All of my friends that are billionaires, all of my friends that are on their way there, or all my friends that are ultra successful, they are licking their chops. There is about to be a fire sale of property, of companies, you name it. It is coming. And it's unfortunate. At the same time, we all know that down markets are where multimillionaires are created. And by the way, this nonsense of somebody becoming a billionaire takes from you, no, it doesn't. There's an unlimited amount of human potential, ingenuity, and innovation. You having people that you're closer with, the more billionaires there are, the more billionaires we get. Just because there's more wealth transference to the top does not mean that other people are not doing better. I spent a lot of time in Colombia in the last couple of years.
The barrier of entry is going down too. It's already been going down.
So I agree that it's unacceptable that 30% of Colombians live in poverty, unacceptable, but it's better than 70%, which is where they were. Naira, her developers are out of Ecuador. She's seen the difference there, right? So there's good things that are happening, but yes, there's destruction as this happens, and it can affect you. I grew up in rodeo country where farming is a tough way of life, right? We have the same amount of food being produced. It used to be 80, 70, huge percentage, right? And now it's 2-3% of the American population is responsible for everything we eat, right? That is creative destruction. So you have to factor that into your plans. This is basic economics, guys. You got any comments?
I would love to close this out with Elias's comment on there's no softness right now. This is about hard things, and the hardest thing that you're going to have is metrics and numbers. Of course, I'm going to say that. Elias asked for two things. He talked about podcasts, and he talked about the nonprofit community he's building to help people grow. And these were actually kind of soft asks. I would love to translate for you guys. One thing I'm not going to do here is I'm not going to focus on the why. Normally, I would translate this into what it means for your revenue and why you should feel comfortable asking for people for this help, because it will be the make or break for your life. But when he said, hey, I want to do more podcasts, if you're interested in being in a podcast, he can track on his end everything from the number of podcasts he's running in the next month compared to the one before, to the number of views he gets. Share his podcasts. You don't just have to help only if you're able to be one of his guests. You can still share it to more people. And then on the same note, if Elias is on the back end tracking conversion, he's trying to see, is the podcast reaching the right people who then see this and either A, share with more people, or B, reach out to him and schedule a call. That's just on the podcast side. If I hit Promise Startups really quickly, everything from the number of attendees to the retention and the return rate to conversion or testimonials, all of these are data points you can track. If you don't start tracking, you can't tell them you made them better. And this is what hard metrics looks like. I know that we are very, very excited today because we keep talking about lots of different things to the point where we are keeping you from lunch at this point. But if you guys can take any of those items and turn it into something tangible for your business today, I ask you all to think about what you could accomplish in the next 90 days and how you could help Elias achieve these goals in the next 90 days.
All right, awesome, guys. If you're a little intimidated by this conversation, get with Sammy, get with Elias. Also, if you're intimidated by your fundraise, if you don't know how to approach it, Come hang out with us every single week online. We have a very large European and MENA, Middle East, North Africa region group of startups as well in our sister community. And every single week we teach fundraising fluency and we teach pitch kung fu online. Right, come get a group picture with us, guys. Thanks so much.
That it will be a no-brainer situation is what I guess anticipate. You know, it's not as easy as that because you have to create the value for exchange, and we do that every day with our customers. Whenever somebody decides to send us a couple $1,000 to do their marketing, it's because they anticipate that they're going to at least 10x.
See how he's building the relationship now into the future? See how he's being very, very patient with the relationships? I love it when founders expect to just date and get married overnight. They meet me yesterday and they're like, hey, give me an angel investor. Will you
That's the
invest?
worst. I don't want to get married tomorrow with somebody I barely know. Like,
Right.
you know, I've done that and it doesn't work.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull us back in. I'm always gonna do this because I'm using the investor brain. When we talked about venture capitalists not being able to support the model of let's give someone money just because it's nice, it's because they